Hello, my name's Andrew Cochrane and I'm the partner in charge of licensing at Flint Solicitors in Derby. I'm here today to talk to you about how you apply for a premises licence and why you might need one. Well, firstly, why do I need a premises licence? The Licensing Act 2003 sets out certain activities which you carry out which may require you to have a premises licence. Those activities are the sale of alcohol, the provision of regulated entertainment, and the provision of late night refreshment. Now, late night refreshment is defined as the sale or supply of hot teas, coffees, or food between the hours of 11 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock the following morning. Regulated entertainment, well, that's things like having a disco or having karaoke or having a live band. There are other types of regulated entertainment as well, but those are probably the most common. Now, how do you set about getting one of these licenses? The licenses are granted by the local authority for the district or borough for the area in which your premises are situated. And in order to get a premises licence, they will require that you complete an application form. Now, the application form, when you get it, can appear quite intimidating. It requires you to set out who you are, who the applicant for the premises licence is. It requires you to set out what licensable activities it is that you want. Do you just want to sell alcohol? Do you just want to sell hot food, for example, because you're a hot food takeaway? Or perhaps like a pub, do you want to sell alcohol, have regulated entertainment, so you can do discos, karaoke, live music, that sort of thing. And then if you're open after 11 o'clock at night, also to serve hot teas and coffees or perhaps some pizza or something like that. So it requires you to set out what it is that you want to do. The form will then go on to say, during what times do you want to do it? These need not be the same time for each activity. You might say, well, I want to be able to sell alcohol until 1 o'clock in the morning, but actually I want to stop having discos at 11 o'clock at night. Equally, you might only want to do late night refreshment for a limited period of time as well. Now, once you've gone on to do that, you're required to give some thought as to how you're going to promote what we call the licensing objectives, of which there are 4. That's the protection of children from harm, the prevention of public nuisance, public safety, and crime and disorder. Dealing with crime and disorder first, well, what sort of things do you need to think about? If you're running a premises which are going to be open until the small hours of the morning and attract a large number of people, perhaps on a Saturday night, the police are likely to say that you should have some sort of CCTV system installed. And that's something that you may want to offer in advance in the crime and disorder box of the application form. What about public nuisance? Well, sorts of things that are often considered there are if you're going to have regulated entertainment. If you're going to have discos, then particularly during the summer months, these can cause a lot of nuisance to any local residents if you have all your windows and doors open at the same time that you've got disco music blaring out. So what are you going to do to stop the premises causing public nuisance? Perhaps you're going to keep your windows and doors shut when any entertainment is taking place. Public safety, well, one of the issues there might be that if you're going to have large numbers of people in the premises, you might want to consider, for example, the use of plastic or polycarbonate glasses at certain times. Not suggesting you should volunteer that all the time, but perhaps just at certain times. And the protection of children from harm. Are your premises suitable for having children in all the time? Or perhaps there want to be limitations on the times when they can come in, or perhaps they have to be accompanied by an adult at all times, or whatever. So those are the sorts of things that you need to give some consideration to. Once you've completed your form, then you need to send it in to your local licensing authority together with an application fee. Typically that's sort of 100, 190 or £315, but can be higher because it's determined by reference to the rateable value of your premises. You have to send in a plan of the premises that you want to have licensed, particularly making sure that you show any outside drinking areas that you may want to use on the plan. And that has to be drawn in accordance with quite prescriptive regulations which are set out in regulations. If you're selling alcohol, you have to name who it is that is going to be what's known as the designated premises supervisor at the premises. This is a person who must hold a personal licence, and they must be named in the application form. they will also be asked to sign a consent form to being nominated as DPS, and that should be sent in with the application as well. At the same time, you should serve copies of all of that to what we call the responsible authorities. This is people like the police, the fire service, the Area Child Protection Committee. There are others as well. There's then a consultation period during which these responsible authorities can object to the application. That consultation period is 28 days. You're also required to display notice of application of what you're applying for, setting out brief details of what you're applying for on the premises themselves in the form of a blue notice. Again, this blue notice has to be drawn in accordance with certain statutory criteria, for example, as regards to font size that you use on the notice, just to ensure you don't put it in really small letters. And that has to be displayed, again, in accordance with the regulations for certain set periods. And you also have to put notice of your application within certain prescribed periods within a local newspaper. Now, the purpose of this is to draw attention to your application to what we call interested parties. That's local residents and local businesses. And they, if they have a problem with your application, can then also make representations to the local licensing authority about it within 28 days. One commonly overlooked thing is that it's also quite possible for people who are in favour of the application to make a representation, and that's often quite useful, particularly if you think that your application might be contentious. Now, when we get to the end of the consultation period, the licensing authority will have a look and they'll see if they've had representations from local authorities, such as police or fire or whatever, or they've had representations from local residents or businesses. If they haven't, your application is granted. You have your premises licence. Well done. If, on the other hand, there are representations and these cannot be resolved, then the local licensing authority will set up a hearing, and that will normally take place within 20 working days of the end of the consultation period. That hearing will take place normally before 3 councillors, and they will decide on whether your application should be granted subject to certain conditions or with other modifications, or whether it might be refused. If at the end of the hearing you're aggrieved or unhappy with the decision in any way, you have a right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court, and they will then rehear the matter and make a decision later on. I hope this has answered your questions, but should you need any more information, some advice on this or any other subject, or you would like to discuss how our services can help your business, please feel free to give me a ring.